and we are going to stay in the NFL here. And speaking of Jared Goff, we are going to talk about Jared Goff because Jared Goff overcame 5 interceptions, and the Detroit Lions rallied to beat and stun the Houston Texans 26-23. Can the Lions be beat in the NFC? And Zach, the mic is yours.
Yeah, Will. So I'll respond to you and what you said right off the bat. Like, if I were to tell you before that game that Jared Goff would have thrown 5 picks and the Lions still would have been able to find a way to win, I don't really think there are many people that would have believed me, right? Like, you rarely see that happen in the NFL. If you turn the ball over, throw 5 interceptions in one game, it's very rare that you could recover from that. But that's exactly what this Lions team did. And the way I describe it is, great teams just find a way to win when they're not playing their best. And that's exactly what the Lions did here. And I think that's really a sign of, okay, you're a really good team and you have something special going. And Dan Campbell literally said during his halftime interview that their only chance to win this game, and at this point, I think they were down, like 23-6.
Yep.
Their only chance to get back into this game would have been forcing CJ Stroud into a mistake or two. And that's easier said than done, because in the first half, CJ Stroud was phenomenal. As we watch one of the touchdown passes to St. Brown, great play design right there by Ben Johnson. And that's exactly what the Lions did. Like, CJ Stroud was perfect in the first half, and their defense, without Aiden Hutchinson, by the way, still found a chance to impact that game and force some key turnovers. And what really impresses me about the Lions, Will, is there were last year with this team, and I know they got to the NFC Championship game. They won 2 playoff games. They had a great year. But last year, you could tell that as good as they were, there were still a few weaknesses that were obvious, and you knew that eventually it was going to cost them. And it did in a few big spots. You look at the kicker, right? Michael Bagley, a guy that they really signed off the street about a month before the playoffs last year. It was obvious in that NFC Championship game against San Francisco, Dan Campbell had no confidence in his kicker getting the job done, and that made him go for a controversial 4th down, controversial decision, and that was a big key play in that NFC Championship game that they lost. And Brad Holmes, one of the best GMs in the league, he deserves credit for fixing that issue. We saw Jake Bates, first of all, he's from Houston. Must have been great for him kicking those 2 clutch field goals in his hometown with all of his family watching. That's unreal. This guy was also selling bricks, they mentioned on the broadcast. So that must be great for him. It's never too late to live your dream and get the job done. So he came up clutch in that game, hit a few big kicks that barely snuck through the uprights. And also this Lions defense, they made some key plays, turning over CJ Stroud. Brian Branch, I think, has already established himself as one of the 10 best defensive players in the league. That was a money draft pick by Brad Holmes. And right now, I think the Lions are in a great spot to not only win the NFC North, but also get home field advantage in the NFC and be that number 1 seed, which is very important. I said this before the season too. Watching the playoffs last year and watching those 2 games they played at Ford Field in Detroit, it was very clear, like, man, this is one of the best home field advantages in the league. Like, going into this dome and winning is going to be very, very difficult. And those 2 games were close. The Rams were right there. The Buccaneers were right there. But there were just a couple key plays made late. And the Lions just were able to take advantage of their opponent's mistakes, and they were able to get to the NFC Championship game. We also know that Jared Goff, although he played pretty well in that game 2 weeks back in Lambeau Field in a pretty poor conditions, we know that historically throughout his career, he's been much better playing in a dome or just normal conditions compared to playing in the cold, playing in cold conditions. So I think being that number 1 seed, getting home field advantage really helps. Now, the one team I want to mention that I think could maybe challenge them is the Eagles. I think that Jalen Hurts, A.J. Brown, Saquon Barkley, when those 3 guys are on the field at the same time, that offense is very, very tough to slow down. But the Eagles, they got to focus on winning their division first, right? As I mentioned at the start of the show, they have a big game coming up tomorrow against the Washington Commanders. So that is their number 1 priority right now, is just finding a way to win the division, not even thinking about beating the Lions and getting to a Super Bowl. So right now, I do think the Lions are in the driver's seat to come out of the NFC and get to the Super Bowl. And everyone in that building, from Brad Holmes to Dan Campbell to Jared Goff, Brian Branch, they all deserve a ton of credit for that. And that was an unreal win on Sunday Night Football in Houston.
Yeah, I don't think the Lions can be beat in the NFC. Now, obviously, anybody can be beat if we want to be, Captain Obvious. But if you look at the body of work thus far through 11 weeks, I just don't see it. Bad teams find a way to lose games, and good teams find a way to win games, and that's a microcosm of why the Chiefs won the last two Super Bowls, right? Because they wasn't the most talented team, but they weren't a bad football team. They were a good football team, and they had championship DNA. And sure, I mean, you look at this past week. Remember, the last show we did, we gave our midseason awards, and in that, we gave our Super Bowl favorite. You went the Chiefs, I went the Lions. And how ironic that after this past week, both teams won the games that they probably should have had lost. Okay, that's because both of these teams are good football teams, and I do believe that you could argue the Chiefs winning was a little bit more luck on the lucky side than the actual comeback that the Lions made. And I do believe that the Chiefs are a lucky football team. However, they won back to back. So at the core of the team, they are a good football team. Okay. Now, coming back to the Lions here, you have to credit the Lions defense for making the comeback against the Texans. I don't want to hear about Jared Goff right now. I don't. Because, sure, he quarterbacked the comeback, but if the defense didn't give him the opportunities, we won't be talking about Jared Goff in the proper light. We'll be talking about Jared Goff. You had a bad night. You threw 5 INTs. Get off the field. But we're not going to say that right now because the defense did what they had to do. The Lions invested so much on that side of the ball this offseason, and it's paying dividends, okay? My guy, Brad Holmes, is getting his money's worth right now. I always thought that Carlton Davis pickup was their best pickup of the offseason in Claire. He had 2 INTs, and I always liked this game. I'm going back to his days in Tampa. He was more of a lockdown guy, but to see him being more of a ball hawk, having those multi-interceptions, the first of his career having multi-interceptions, it shows you that he's evolving his game, and what they're doing with the man coverage is definitely holding up. And look, they just did what they had to do. They literally shut out the Texans completely in the second half of the game. Okay. They stuffed Joe Mixon. I believe he had 25 carries for 46 yards. Iced him out the game. Okay. And I understand that we are not going to talk about linemen here on the show, right? That's not the sexiest topic of conversations, talking about a game like that and you talking about a lineman. But I want to talk about a lineman right now. And I want to play these highlights here. One that I already played before. We can play that again because we just going to look at Amon-Ra St. Brown, right? And you see Jared Goff here in this clip. He throws a ball to Amon-Ra, but look at Penny Sewell, 58, with the block right there. His blocking, his impact game to game cannot be overstated or understated, okay? His impact is why the Lions win games, all right? The Lions win games through their offensive line. That's how they win games. That's the heart and core of how these guys are able to get out in space, like Amon-Ra, like the running game, how Gibbs is able to get to the hash, to the other hash, because of guys like Penny Sewell. I'm going to play another clip with his blocking, showing his blocking and why I believe that he had a very big impact in the comeback. Let's watch it right here. Now, look, he's passing the ball, and look at his block right there. 1 block, 2 blocks. 2 blocks right there. He blocked 2 guys to allow Gibbs to get the necessary yardage and more to extend the drive. The Lions win games through their offensive line. Penei Sewell and the defense are primarily responsible for the comeback on Sunday Night Football that we saw.
And I think that's another sign of being a really good team. Like, we know Jared Goff has had a phenomenal season up to this point, right? He's been in MVP conversations. Now, it's clear that Sunday night he was not on his game. He threw 5 interceptions, but that is the sign of a good team where you're not responsible on one guy just bailing you out or carrying you time and time again. You have to be a complete team where you're getting contributions from all around, even in places where you don't necessarily expect it. Like the kicker. Like, to be honest, I wasn't 100% confident that he was going to make that first kick, especially to tie the game. But he did. And that's what great teams do. They find ways to win. And I'm telling you, man, just getting that number 1 seed is so important. And I didn't I always thought the Lions were the best team and the team to beat in this conference. But the fact is, when you're playing in that NFC North and you have 2 games against the Packers, you have 2 games against the Vikings, 2 games against the Bears, especially when you have a quarterback in Jared Goff that historically has struggled in cold weather, like securing that number 1 seed and getting all of your playoff games in that dome is very, very important. And they're on their way right now. While they do have a ton of divisional games left, we've seen this team now go on the road to Minnesota and win. We've seen this team go on the road to Green Bay in bad conditions and win. And now we see them go on the road to Houston and find a way to win. The schedule isn't too tough going forward. They do have one key game on the road in San Francisco, Monday Night Football rematch of that NFC title game. I think that will be a good one, but credit to Dan Campbell, man. This guy has done such a good job, and I don't think we talk about it enough. It's really one of the best rebuilds I've ever seen from a coach, because literally this team started they were like 0-13 his first year. They were the worst team in the league, and just a few years later, here they are at the top of the NFC and the clear favorites to come out of that conference.
Yeah, them in the NFL and OKC Thunder in the NBA. I mean, 2 historic rebuilds. You're talking about coming out of the basement into the penthouse, and they got consistent playoff contenders. And look, to me, the X factor will continue to be the secondary of the Lions, especially considering the loss of Aiden Hutchinson a couple weeks ago, right? How they hold up against these wide receivers is going to be critical, right? Because you look at the playoffs last year, Mike Evans over 100 yards, Puka Nacua over 100 yards, Cooper Kupp, right? Brandon
You
Ayuk
remember,
had a good game.
Ayuk just who was the Vildor just
Yep.
mossing that corner on
Literally,
the
and just bullying these guys. And you look at this season and you look at some of those same talents. Cooper Kupp had a retro game, I believe, in week 1, where he had over 100 yards and was catching everything in sight, right? Then you had Metcalf, who bullied these guys in the Monday Night Football game, including some missed opportunities of calls that didn't go his favor when it should have, right? And you look at, I believe Justin Jefferson was in that category. I forgot how much yards he had on that day, but I'm pretty sure he had a good game as well. How can the Lions hold up against those guys, right? And I look at the 2 teams that I think that could be the biggest threats in the conference to me would be the Packers and the 49ers. Well, the 49ers lost Ayuk for the year. Okay, so now even though they got guys that they can plug in the system and just kind of like, like a Terminator, you kill it and it comes back, you still would rather play that team without Brandon Ayuk, right? You got the Packers. They don't have an alpha, but they do have guys, right? And you think about it, the meeting that they had, the Packers did drop a lot of those balls. So if they catch those balls this time around, the game should be more closer. And then your team, the Eagles, you have A.J. Brown who could win one-on-one. You have Devonta Smith who could win one-on-one. So how the secondary holds up in the conference come playoff time against the elites of the elites is what's going to be the X factor in them winning a Super Bowl.
Well, before we move on, and I know you said that you don't think there is a team in the NFC that could beat them, and I think for right now I would agree. I would make Detroit the significant favorites in this conference, especially if they do get that home field. But I want kind of to do like a quick temperature check with some of these other teams in this conference right now, because I think it's pretty interesting. I think overall, the conference is a little bit better and a little bit deeper than I thought originally. San Francisco had a nice win on Sunday going on the road to Tampa Bay and winning. It wasn't perfect. They should have won by a lot more, but they just could not hit a field goal. Jake Moody was coming back from an injury, but the Niners have they have Christian McCaffrey back now. They're going to be firmly in the mix. Arizona has won a couple games in a row. I think Kyler Murray is playing the best football of his career. I know you were a big believer in the Packers and Jordan Love going into this season. The Vikings have taken a little bit of a step back, but I still think they're going to be a playoff team. The Falcons look like they're clearly the best team in their division. And then you have the Eagles and Commanders in the NFC. Like, do you have any firm opinions or takes on some of these teams in this conference? And by the time we get to January, what they could do in the playoffs?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you look across the board and you look at the NFC, right? I think my biggest thing for me really is, in a nutshell, that's a very good question. I'm trying to think about how could I.
What do you think of the 49ers, dude? Like, do you think they're fully back in it, like with McCaffrey?
Yeah,
back?
I think with Christian McCaffrey back in the fold, I think that changes their entire offense drastically. And I think when you have a consistent winner like the 49ers or even the Chiefs, that this year has been dealing with injuries, that is your time to capitalize off of those injuries. We just got word that Isaiah Pacheco is going to be back, right? And now CMC is back, right? So you got to attack and capitalize. And a lot of teams had opportunities to capitalize on the 49ers mishaps and the Chiefs as well, and their injuries, and they haven't done that. So now the 49ers are still dangerous no matter what. And then you got the Cardinals, who I think, had the best win the entire week. They really looked elite. They was methodical down the field. Their offense couldn't be stopped. And I think I would like to end there because I think for me, the Cardinals are a team to me that's very polarizing because they arguably could be the most dangerous team in the NFC. They beat the 49ers early in the year. You have the quarterback who we know prior to this year has not been a consistent quarterback. He had 2 halves of a season. He'll have the half where he's the MVP or the MVP candidate, and then he'll have the games where he subs himself out of a game, says I'm out, and he quits and he looks bad. If he can be consistent, to me, Kyler Murray is the biggest X factor in this whole entire conference. I'm glad that you brought up that topic because I would like, that's really my main topic in the NFC. Kyler Murray is the biggest X factor in this entire conference. If he can give you consistent play, there's no reason why this offense cannot continue to hum and be dangerous to anybody in the NFC, including the Lions.
And I think it's important to note right now, the Cardinals are in first place in the NFC West. They are a full game ahead of San Francisco, and they're actually going to play the last week of the season. How about that? Can you see week 18, 49ers at Cardinals? I think that game could be for the NFC West, especially considering right now the Cardinals have the tiebreaker over San Francisco. They beat them, as you mentioned. And looking at the 49ers schedule, dude, they still have to go to Buffalo. They still have to go to Green Bay. They still play Detroit, which is not going to be easy. They still have to go to Miami. The Dolphins, with Tua Tagovailoa healthy, looked a lot better on Monday night. So I still think that division is up for grabs. We know this NFC North is a very good division. The Lions still have a ton of divisional games left. So, I mean, maybe I prematurely crown them. Like, it might not be a guarantee they get that number 1 seed, despite how well they are playing.
Please like and subscribe for all the up-to-date content. You've been slinging shows left and right, slinging content left and right. Please don't miss anything. If you do, like, subscribe, leave a comment, leave a question, something you may want to answer, something you may have. All ideas are great ideas. Nothing's a dumb question.